Ron Howard seemed ideal for half a century. The Mayberry native who became a Hollywood star was an all-American youngster. However, in his most recent interview, he disclosed the darkness that lies beneath the grin. He is constantly troubled by the terrible decision he made in 1991. When he was winning honors, he nearly lost the family member to addiction. You will be devastated by Ron's admission about what actually transpired over those missing months, as well as the moment on stage when his body collapsed. On March 1, 1954, Ronald William Howard was born in Duncan, Oklahoma. And the room began to converse as soon as he opened his eyes. Before enlisting in the Air Force in 1948, his father, Rance Howard, had taken on the stage name Howard. In 1949, his mother, Jean Spiegel, who had studied as an actress, wed Rance in Winchester, Kentucky. Rance was still in uniform and juggling her aspirations of being a movie star with her military life when Ron came along. However, Ron was already on camera before he could speak. He appeared on screen for the first time at the age of 18 months in a western titled Frontier Woman. Shot between the end of 1955 until the beginning of 1956. It wasn't his first gig on the set. It was the beginning of a life in which the imprints of childhood and the camera blended together. Ron was learning where to stand under the lights while other toddlers were beginning to walk. The Howards left Oklahoma behind as television spread west. For the sake of proximity rather than sunshine, Rance took the family all the way to California. He had no desire for glitz. He was placing all of his money on being close to the new TV hub. Even though Ron was only a toddler at the time, the relocation placed him in close proximity to writers, producers, and sets before he even saw a school desk. Before starting elementary school, he was already working on Playhouse 90. And the family's plan was on track by the time his brother Clint was born in Burbank on April 20, 1959. Their profits were handled internally. There were no outsiders or studio guardians, simply a father carefully juggling his acting responsibilities with serving as his son's lone support system. In order to stay in touch with Ron's world and keep things going, Rance accepted more than 140 film roles and 177 TV appearances. Next was October 3, 1960. Ron was 6 years old. America first saw Opie Taylor on the Andy Griffith Show that evening. Ron appeared to be simply another young actor with the Ronnie Howard credit. However, the relationship was distinct. Something more profound occurred on set. Rance did more than simply drop his youngster off. He posed a challenge to the authors. He informed the producers after an early reading that the father-son scenes in the show felt phony. Andy Griffith paid attention. They shook hands on a tangible object. The bond between Andy and Opie would be similar to that between Ron and Rance. The essence of the show was created by that handshake. Rance stayed close as Ron handled scripts and schedules that most adults would crumble under, even going so far as to guest star 5 times throughout the years. Ron didn't simply mature for 8 seasons till 1968. His early years were formed by love, labor, and adult expectations while he was dressed in small-town tales from television. Their Burbank residence wasn't a lavish mansion. Ron attended David Starr Jordan Jr. after Robert Louis Stevenson Elementary, John Burroughs High School after high school. The family conserved money and consumed meatloaf and fish sticks like actors who were aware that everything might end tomorrow. Rance and Jean followed the rules, but there were stacks of scripts close to the supper table. No stage parent chaos, no paid guardians. When Ron wasn't learning lines, he participated in park league sports. Clint also entered the business and steadily accumulated more than 200 acting credits. They learned early on what it meant to punch a clock with cameras because they were both brothers and co-workers. Ron did not work with the instincts of a child star. Training was the source of it. He learned from Rance how to listen, pause, and react as a human being rather than a performer. Ron was cast as Opie because he didn't play the part of a child actor. He simply did something. Sheldon Leonard, the producer, saw it immediately. Ron didn't try to be cute, he claimed. He simply spoke the truth. Rance instilled that belief in him. Don't be cute, be honest. Ron's first compensation was in the low hundreds of dollars per episode, even at age 6, but it increased as the show gained popularity. When admirers stopped him in Burbank to get autographs, he was still losing baby teeth. His youth, however, was subtly disappearing while his face was on TV. One of the most memorable scenes occurred in Opie, the Birdman, episode 1 of season 4. An incident in which Opie raises orphaned baby birds after unintentionally murdering their mother was captured on camera by Ron, age 9. There were no theatrical ploys. He simply stood there, blinking and breathing, allowing genuine feeling to guide him. Retakes were hardly necessary for director Bob Sweeney. It's what Andy Griffith referred to as adult-level timing. Ron substituted. He considered something that truly hurt, if the circumstances demanded it. When the camera stopped, he released it. It was more than just skill. Most children never have control like that. Ron, however, felt isolated despite the love on site. Golden cage is how he described those years. Sealed but safe. He had a little classroom at Desalokina, close to stage 40. According to California law, students must attend school for 3 of the 8 hours each day. Ron had no actual classmates, but a welfare worker stayed close by. While Grips rolled dollies, he performed math. He sat with the prop guy or his dad for lunch. Andy would play the guitar. Clean jokes were told by Don Knotts. They attempted to normalize it. Ron, however, missed neighborhood bike trips and sandlot baseball. He sensed it, but he didn't complain. The Music Man introduced a new form of pressure in 1962. He was cast as Winthrop Peru in a high-profile musical when he was 8 years old. He had tone deafness. He was unsteady. He was coached through the tune Gary, Indiana for hours by music conductor Ray Hindorf. During the soft shoe routine, Ron became anxious and told Shirley Jones in a whisper, "I can't do it, Shirley. I can't do it." She calmed him down. It worked, even though the crew shot him from the knees up and later added tap sounds. His timid, endearing portrayal contributed to the movie's success in 1962. He had battled valiantly behind the scenes, but no one saw it. Ron committed both his and Shirley Jones's lines to memory in between takes. He directed little performers through their lines and marks while he played with dolls and acted out entire scenarios. It appeared to be play to others. It appeared to Shirley like a budding filmmaker. Rance had already begun composing screenplays for other shows, including The Flintstones. Ron learned from him how to deconstruct a scene and comprehend the motivations behind each character's words. Those teachings remained. They remained hidden until Ron, at the age of 23, began directing movies like Grand Theft Auto. In 1966, Ron made a new attempt. He joined the Monroes, a Western series that was shot in the Rockies of Wyoming. The terrain was rugged and authentic. He watched ranch hands to learn how to ride a horse. The place was pricey. In 1967, NBC canceled the series after just 26 episodes. Ron was 13. He experienced rejection for the first time. Even while the Andy Griffith Show was still running strong, he was severely impacted by the Monroes. He believed he was to blame. He was still affected by that sting. The Brady Bunch pilot called in 1968. An audition was extended to Ron. He declined it. His parents said no, not because he didn't want it. Gene and Rance established a rule. Every day, starting at 9 a.m., one of them had to be at home. And 6 p.m. They wanted balance if a job came in. They wanted him to have a typical childhood. Ron also desired that. At 14, he yearned for friends, school, and space. His career may have been rescued when he passed the test, since he went on to play Richie Cunningham on Happy Days in 1974, a position that lasted into his adolescence and provided him with the funds and independence to work behind the camera. Ron's agent accomplished a significant feat in 1969. He was able to obtain Ron's $50,000 annual residuals from the Andy Griffith Show reruns. At the height of his baseball career, Sandy Koufax made more than that. The Howards, however, did not overspend. They kept it slim. They purchased U.S. bonds, opened savings accounts, and led their usual lives. Ron pleaded with friends to invest in a go-kart company. His parents gave him permission. He lost almost $25,000 in all. He learned about risk for the first time from that. He made money from acting, but managing it was a different matter. That lesson resonated with me. The Andy Griffith Show's last episode aired on April 1, 1968. Ron was 14 years old. He was familiar with the set. He was aware of the locations of all the lights and grips. It felt heavy, that last week. Call sheets were retained as mementos. Ron and Andy talked baseball late into the night. Ron sensed something coming to an end even though their farewell on camera was silent. His entire boyhood had been spent 48 feet away from a camera lens. He must now be a teenager, and in just 2 years, he was juggling auditions and school. The next chapter began the day they demolished the Mayberry sets. Ron Howard's life was turned upside down in 1974 when he entered Gary Marshall's office at the age of 19. Unlike the rest, he did not read the lines. As though he had been there every day, he simply sat down and placed his order for a cherry phosphate. Henry Winkler and I clicked right away. It didn't matter that it wasn't in the script. Marshall witnessed Ron transform into Richie Cunningham for a duration of 12 minutes. ABC was skeptical. They were concerned that the Mayberry kid would no longer be able to pass for a teenager. Gary Marshall, however, resisted, and Ron agreed to a 5-year contract of $7,500 per episode. He had outperformed 35 other actors by sounding just like someone who would assist your grandmother with shopping, not by acting louder. He received 255 episodes as a result. Ron had been portraying the same upbeat adolescent for so long by season 5 in 1977 that it began to seem phony. At the age of 23, he was portraying a child trapped in a moment as the outer world burned. It didn't make sense that Richie had never noticed Vietnam, which was all over the news and in the papers. Ron then sent ABC a 3-page memo. He requested genuine subjects. He made a story pitch about Richie being drafted. They declined. Too dangerous for advertising, too political. Therefore, glances were the compromise. In the background, Richie is reading war-related newspapers. A little remark regarding deferments. Ron felt constrained. Later, he told TV Guide that he felt like he was out of breath as a joyful adolescent when the world was no longer happy. Something was planted in him by that frustration. He wanted to do more than just perform. He desired authority. He desired to be a director. Fonzie was all over in 1976. $50 million worth of goods were sold, including lunchboxes, posters, toys, and leather coats. ABC attempted to change the program's name to Fonzie's Happy Days. Ron had witnessed similar incidents in the past. Rance, his father, had spent his entire professional life fighting for the right to bill. Ron got to his feet. Despite earning $15,000 every episode, he assured them that he would go away. He gave them 48 hours to maintain the current championship. They risked losing him and facing a $500,000 contract breach lawsuit if they didn't. Gary Marshall took his side. The episode focused on a family rather than just Fonzie. Halfway through, ABC gave in. Fonzie received first billing in the credits, but the name remained. The victory was unspoken. Then Ron received his shot in October 1977. A Date with Fonzie, episode 5 of season 5, was directed by him. It had a meager $10,000 budget. 3 days, 32 scenes. He arrived with a shot list so thorough that the team referred to it as Spielberg level. In one scene, a 90-second tracking shot trailed Fonzie through Arnold's diner. That would normally take hours. Ron saved $3,000 by doing it flawlessly in 2 attempts. The ratings increased by 12%. That equates to 31 million viewers. In addition to his acting pay, ABC paid him an additional $2,500 for each of the 2 additional episodes he directed. Later, Henry Winkler claimed that Ron unnerved him in the greatest manner. Rather than relying on slogans, he pushed genuine emotion. Something else was developing while all of this was taking place. Ron appeared in Roger Corman's low-budget adolescent crash film Eat My Dust in 1976. However, it wasn't merely for amusement. He had struck a bargain. Only if Corman allowed him to direct the next one would he act. Grand Theft Auto was that movie, which came out in 1977. Ron and his father, Rance, co-wrote it. Despite having a $602,000 budget, the movie generated $15 million. That is a return of 2,400%. On camera, they demolished 70 vehicles, including 3 Cadillacs, 7 police cars, and a $40,000 Rolls-Royce. Ron didn't hold off on getting permits. He took pictures on actual roads close to Victorville. The turmoil was real, the cars were flipping, the cameras were shaking. In the film, he even featured his mother, brother Clint, and co-star Marion Ross from Happy Days. On June 16, 1977, the movie debuted in theaters. All of a sudden, the redhead from Mayberry was no longer the target of jokes. On June 7, 1975, Ron married Cheryl Alley at the age of just 21. They were in love in high school. At his parents' place, he proposed on a couch. His best man was Henry Winkler. Tom Bosley and Andy Griffith were also present. Ron was on scene when Cheryl gave birth to their first child. He left everything behind and hurried to the hospital. He stated it plainly years later. The true story was about Cheryl. She had always been. She kept everything together while he wrote, directed, and filmed. With Night Shift, a dark comedy set in a mortuary, Ron made a significant breakthrough in 1982. It was a crazy story. From a morgue in New York City, 2 men operate a prostitution ring. It debuted Michael Keaton in his first significant role and starring Henry Winkler. $8 million was the budget. It brought in $21 million. Test audiences found it too raunchy, so Keaton danced around with a Walkman, put thoughts into a tape recorder, and shouted, "Is this a great country or what?" Despite their nervousness, the MPAA was successful. Winkler was nominated for a Golden Globe. Keaton burst upon the action. The film was audacious and demonstrated Ron's ability to produce studio films that weren't cautious. Then Splash appeared. Ron directed a man-mermaid love romance starring Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah in 1984. Disney released it on Touchstone for the first time. Spent $8 to $11 million. $69.8 million in gross. It took hours to affix the 35-pound mermaid tail. Every underwater scene was shot by Daryl Hannah herself. No double stunt. She was a better swimmer than the pros. Producer Brian Grazer and Ron were taken aback. The movie had a depressing conclusion initially. Madison goes back to the sea. Alan remains on land. However, every wife in the room detested it during test screenings, so they changed it. After her, Alan dives in. Love triumphs. The critics gave their approval. On Rotten Tomatoes, it received a 91% rating. It received an Oscar nomination. Tom Hanks rose to fame. It was also confirmation for Ron. He was more than just good. He might dominate the box office. In November 1985, Ron and Brian Grazer co-founded Imagine Entertainment following Splash. From the beginning, it was serious. The following year, they combined their businesses and went public with Imagine. An agreement was signed by TriStar Pictures. The Movie Channel and Showtime also did. TV movies, motion pictures, and eventually programs like Sports Night were their initial offers. In 1998, they invested $4.5 million to renovate their Century City offices. Though the spending was discussed in whispers, the amounts were more audible. Won 98 Emmys and more than 43 Oscar nominations over several decades. Imagine that the global box office receipts for movies would exceed $15 billion. Apollo 13 altered everything once more in 1995. With a budget of $52 million, Ron directed it. They purchased real NASA mission control panels from government surplus, some of which cost as little as $1. On board the Vomit Comet, they recorded 612 23-second zero-gravity episodes. That meant parabolic flight dives for 10 days. It took 12 shots to cause the explosion that was witnessed with Ed Harris. The price was $340,000. Harris's eyebrows were singed after a test went awry. Ron wouldn't pretend. Every flickering light, the radio chatter, the switch locations. It must have been correct. Globally, the film brought in $355 million. It received 2 Academy Awards and was nominated for 9, but the journey there almost killed him. For 90 days in a row, Ron put in 18-hour workdays. He oversaw night rehearsals, observed every reel, and attended NASA briefings. He passed out on day 90. Dehydration and high blood pressure. The set fell silent. For 36 hours, production was halted. The team had mission control jerseys on when he got back. It was no longer only a film. It was evidence. Opie Taylor had been buried by Ron. He didn't have to reaffirm it. Then he did something wrong. The 1999 release of EDTV came at a cost of $80 million. In total, it earned $50 million. For it, Ron had rejected Castaway. It was released 1 month after The Truman Show, which was a superior version of the same story. Critics claimed that despite being a contributing factor to the issue, it felt like a warning against the media. Imagine the losses of $30 million. However, Ron listened, learnt, and proceeded. Imagine was working on 23 projects by 1999. They received funding from Universal for 6 movies a year, each with a $60 million budget. Ron's name was on them all, even though he didn't direct them all. The offices were bustling. There were now 140 employees. Just in the 1990s, their output brought in $2.3 billion. A Beautiful Mind was directed by Ron Howard in 2001, with a budget of $58 million and a distinct vision. His goal was to evoke the same emotions in the audience as John Nash did. Through faith and silence, not through odd filters or disorienting effects. He captured Nash's hallucinations without any warning, shimmering edits, or visual signals. Because they were real to Nash, the characters William Parcher and Charles Herman felt authentic. Ron also wanted the audience to learn the truth at the same moment as Nash did. With 90% of the movie playing out exactly as Nash experienced it, the majority of the scenes were filmed in chronological order. To get it right, Ron went back to Princeton 3 times. The outcomes were astounding. He took home the Oscar for Best Director on March 24, 2002. However, there was more than merely Nash's truth concealed behind the narrative. It was also Ron's. Because behind the flawless edits and award-winning setups were fragments of his own life strewn throughout decades of filmmaking, family, pressure, remorse, and silent suffering. Despite its success, A Beautiful Mind was not immune to criticism. The omissions were questioned by critics. They observed the details of Nash's story that were absent. The 1954 arrest that cost him his security clearance, the affairs, and the abandoned son from 1953. The oversimplified description of Nash equilibrium was criticized by mathematicians. However, despite all of that, the film made over $313 million worldwide. It took home 4 Oscars. Ron had demonstrated that a tale could still win people over even if it severely distorted reality. 5 years later, Ron found himself in a whole other kind of pandemonium. On a $125 million budget, he directed The Da Vinci Code in 2006, starring Tom Hanks as Robert Langdon. However, the Catholic Church was unwelcoming. Westminster Abbey in London and Saint-Sulpice in Paris both closed. Even Ron's team's attempt to digitally rebuild entire churches was not without its challenges. Nothing at Saint-Sulpice matched the compositor's expectations, and the virtual coordinates were wrong by centimeters. The scenes in Westminster had to be shot at the cathedrals in Lincoln and Winchester instead. Lincoln permitted filming from August 15 to 19, 2005, for a fee of $100,000. Permission was granted by the Louvre, but only at night. The Mona Lisa has no lights, therefore in order to acquire the picture, 5 fake reproductions had to be created. Globally, the movie brought in $758 million. The figures appeared simple. It was never. Ron was still grieving in private that year. Rance Howard, his father, had been involved in almost everything. Splash, A Beautiful Mind, Parenthood, Apollo 13. However, Rance passed away in Los Angeles on November 25, 2017, at the age of 89, a few months after his wife Judy had died in January. On November 17, 1928, Harold Engel Beckenholt was born in Duncan, Oklahoma. Ron referred to him as a country child from the Great Depression who, by following his dreams, transformed his life. In addition to appearing on Seinfeld, Grey's Anatomy, and The Waltons, Rance was nominated for an Emmy for Through the Magic Pyramid. Ron had lost the man who had taught him how to listen and how to act. Based on the 2006 play, Ron tackled Frost Nixon in 2008. He documented the quiet conflict between Richard Nixon and David Frost with a budget of $25 to $29 million. He looked at old video. He observed every breath, every pause, every twitch. Nixon's famous statement, "I let the American people down," struck like thunder when Frank Langella finally uttered it. At the 81st Academy Awards, the movie received 5 Oscar nominations, including Best Director and Best Picture. It barely made $28.5 million, though, in spite of the praise. It was one of the few contenders for Best Film to lose money. Long before any of this, on June 7, 1975, Ron had tied the knot with Nancy Morgan, his high school sweetheart. Both of them were 21. From the beginning, they established a rule: don't discuss work over supper. For 50 years, that rule was in effect. Nancy had also taken action. There have been good days for her. She was aware of the business, but she kept their house safe. Bryce Dallas, the twins Jocelyn and Paige, and Reed were their 4 children. Ron was juggling studios and settings. Ron made a mistake that he subsequently came to regret when Bryce was born in March 1981. When she was 5, he conducted her school play. Despite his good intentions, he forced her to act before she was ready. He expressed regret years later. She pardoned him. After attending NYU's Tisch School, she started her own business with The Village in 2004 and went on to make $8 million for each Jurassic World movie. Ron took a step back. He refrained from pushing the others. He had acquired knowledge. However, not every lesson was simple. His brother Clint became addicted to cocaine and alcohol in the 1980s. Clint had also performed as a child. And he wasn't treated well by Hollywood. He was at his lowest point by 1990. Ron was honest with him. Lose the relationship or go to treatment. Clint decided to live. They detailed everything in their memoir, The Boys, published in 2021. Ron acknowledged that he felt bad. Clint had felt left behind by his own ascent. Jocelyn was born in 1991. Ron departed for 6 months to film Far and Away in Ireland just a year later. He had never been separated from Nancy, Bryce, or his baby for so long. Jocelyn had changed by the time he got home. Bryce hardly recalled him. Nancy had been raising her children by herself. He was shaken by the moment. He vowed to never again engage in lengthy foreign shoots. For the most part, he maintained his pledge, but in 2005, he broke it. Long reshoots were required for Cinderella Man. More of Bryce's life was lost to him. Ron gave a bench to John Burroughs High School, where they originally met, in honor of their 50th anniversary in 2025. He confessed in private. He still felt guilty about all he had missed. Nancy gave a nod. She wished he had realized the cost sooner, but the no-work meal rule remained in effect. He directed Hillbilly Elegy in 2020. For it, Netflix paid $45 million. Critics ripped apart the movie. Despite receiving a RZZY nomination for Worst Director, Glenn Close was nominated for an Oscar, a Sage, and a Golden Globe. Ron published Rebuilding Paradise, a documentary about the 2018 wildfire that burned 14,000 homes and claimed 85 lives, in the same year. Heaven had been his mother-in-law's home. He was broken by the stories and the video. He described it as the most challenging project he had ever worked on. He spent more than a year filming. He kept his eyes fixed on it. Next was Eden. Ron took a different course in 2025. a survival thriller that takes place in the Galapagos Islands in the 1930s. On vacation 15 years prior, he had heard the story for the first time. That evening, he began sketching the film on his BlackBerry. Sydney Sweeney, Jude Law, Ana de Armas, Vanessa Kirby, and Daniel Bruhl starred in it. The $55 million movie only made $1 million when it debuted in 664 theaters. Ron described it as a creative risk that made him anxious. He was on the verge of giving up already. Around him, Solo, a Star Wars story, fell apart in 2018. After the original directors were fired, he had taken over in the middle of the shoot. 70% of the movie was res-hot by him. Still, it exploded. He officially stated in 2025 that Solo nearly put a stop to his directing career, but Bryce saved him. He came back with Apple TV Plus initiatives. He continued. Ron has been married for 50 years by 2025. He and Brian Grazer have co-managed Imagine Entertainment for 40 years. With more than 50 films produced, the business received 289 Emmy nominations and 47 Oscar nominations. He has above $200 million in net worth. He gave his father credit for instilling in him the value of humility. He is now a young director's mentor. He continues to narrate. He can still clearly recall the bench at Burroughs High, the vacant dinner table, and the infant who hardly recognized him. He recalls everything,